record on the computer. Well, welcome everybody. This is a very exciting meeting to hear about a local problem that we can have a lot of impact on helping resolve. And what we'll do is we'll have, this is typically what happens is that, you know, I will introduce Alice Kaufman, who's here to present to us. And then Alice has a PowerPoint presentation that she'll walk us through. And then after that, as you all know, we'll have Q&A. And you can feel free, what I'll probably do is if you want to if you have a question, you don't want to forget it, go ahead and put it in the chat. And then I'll also let people raise their hands. And so what I'll probably do is, Alice, what I'll do is run back and forth between the people with their hands raised and the chat. And I'll sort of manage that so you don't have to worry about that.
All right, so we'll go through the presentation, then we'll do Q&A afterwards.
That's right. And then at the very end, we'll save a few minutes. We have a number of really interesting presentations, events that we're sponsoring coming forward in the next month or couple of months. And so I'd like the folks to our leadership to share that. And I'll probably be calling on certainly Glenn and Campbell and Gary and if there's anyone else here, which I don't think so, that might have interesting events to talk about, we'll make sure that they get a chance to talk as well. All right, so with that in mind, let us get started. And I would like to introduce Alice Kaufman, who's the Policy and Advocacy Director for Green Foothills, a group that I've known about for a long time. They've done great work in both Santa Clara and San Mateo to protect the environment and natural resources and farmlands and open space. Really important, very visible group in the Valley. And Alice actually, in addition to her work at Green Foothills, in the past came to Green Foothills as a staff attorney for the Environmental Law Foundation that's in Oakland. Did that for a number of years. And then right now, in addition to Green Foothills, she also serves on the Redwood City Parks Commission. So she's a very busy person. So with that in mind, we're here to talk about the Sargent Ranch Quarry proposal. And Green Foothills, along with some one other group that I'm sure Alice will talk about, have really led the way in letting the public know what's happening and why it's important to protect the Sargent Ranch area, and which is, I think, partly Santa Clara County and partly Santa Cruz County as well. So you know, we're going to hear a lot about what's going on in that area and why it's important to us from an environmental, climate, water, emissions point of view. And wildlife point of view. So I guess with that, Alice, you do have, if let me, you can share your screen if you'd like to now. And I think you're co-host, so you should be able to do that.
Yes. All right, great.
Fabulous. All right.
All right. Oh, you know what's going on is that there we go. There's the slideshow button. The little Zoom thing was covering it up. I was like, where? I had to move the Zoom thing, and then I saw it. Then I saw the button. Okay, great. Well, thanks so much, Karen, and thanks everybody for having me tonight to give this presentation. Really appreciate you taking your time to learn about this issue. So Karen asked me to come tonight to talk about the proposal for the Sargent Ranch Quarry, which is this open pit sand and gravel mine. Let me just get right into it and go ahead with my presentation and show you about it. So this quarry is located on Juristac, and so the first thing to explain to you is what is Juristac. Juristac is a landscape that is the heart of the ancestral lands of the Amah Mutsun Tribal Band. And the Amah Mutsun are the descendants of those who were taken to the missions of San Juan Bautista and Santa Cruz. So those two missions, that's how they define the tribal membership. For thousands of years, sacred ceremonies were held at Juristac. The name Juristac translates to place of the big head. The TAC suffix, I guess you could call it, it means place. So that's why you'll sometimes see other place names in, in related indigenous languages that end with that. Like some of you may be familiar with Ulastoc in the city of Santa Clara. So it's, the AC or TAC ending is very common in place names. So anyway, so it means place of the big head. There were big head dances associated with healing and renewal ceremonies that took place at Juristac. They were often attended by neighboring tribal groups. So it was a regional gathering spot. And Juristac was considered to be the home of a powerful spiritual being known as Kuksui in the Amah Mutsun religion. So although there are many sites of cultural importance to the Amah Mutsun in southern Santa Clara County and northern San Benito County, and over to Santa Cruz, which is the ancestral territory, Juristac is the most sacred and the most important. And so that's why this is such a big issue for the tribe. So that's why it's a big issue for the tribe. Why is it a big issue for environmental groups? And I guess I should explain where there's a coalition of, I think 40 or 50 different groups, including a bunch of different environmental groups in the area. I saw Katja Irvin is here tonight with the Sierra Club. The Sierra Club Loma Prieta chapter is part of the coalition, as well as the ACLU of Northern California. Surge showing up for racial justice at Sacred Heart Community Center is another one. There's, the Friends of Juristac, which is a group from Santa Cruz. We've got several groups from Santa Cruz as well as in Santa Clara County. We're all part of the coalition that are working to stop this quarry. So Juristac is, why are environmental groups concerned? Because Juristac is also a critical wildlife corridor. It's important, environmentally important in other ways, but this is kind of the big one. It's one of only 2 remaining pathways in and out of the Santa Cruz Mountains to the east. It's one of only 2 going to the east and the only one going to the south to the Gavilan Range. So it's really important for that reason. I sometimes tell people it's like, think of the Santa Cruz Mountains as being an island of habitat surrounded by a sea of development. If you are an animal, say you're a mountain lion, and you're kind of trapped in the Santa Cruz Mountains, mountain lions need a very wide territory to range in. They need to be able to get out. And where can they get out? Well, they can't go through downtown San Jose. They can't go through, they can't swim across the bay. So they're going to have to go southward. They can cross over to the Diablo Range through Coyote Valley, in between San Jose and Morgan Hill. But then if they go further south than that, they hit Morgan Hill, they hit San Martin, they hit Gilroy, and then you're at the southern end of the Santa Cruz Mountains, which is where Juristac is. So, so it's really important in that sense. And then it's also what you might call live-in habitat for some of these smaller animals. I've got a photo of a red-legged frog here. American badger is another animal that lives there and also needs to migrate in and out. And then tricolored blackbirds are also a species that's found in Juristac. And all of the animals that you're seeing here are considered to be threatened, to have threatened status. So what is the threat to this landscape? Why are we concerned? So this is a proposal for an open pit sand and gravel mine that has been submitted to the county for review. They're in the middle of the environmental impact review process. I can get into that a little bit more later, but we are just so you know, right now the environmental impact report has come out. Comment period happened. Comments went in and it was closed, and now we're waiting for the county to finish reviewing the comments and release the final EIR. So in case you've never seen a sand and gravel mine, the photo I've got here is of the Granite Rock Quarry, which is 3 miles west of Juristac. And just for scale, these tiny little dots, hopefully you can see my cursor moving, these tiny little dots, those are trucks way at the bottom of the mine. So you can see we're talking about hundreds of feet deep, this pit, and, and longer, even longer than that. So this is something huge. This is not, some quarries are a little bit smaller, but what we're talking about here is going to be huge. It's going to be on 420 acres. The majority landowner is called the Debt Acquisition Company of America, as I have here on the slide. They are a company based in San Diego that buys up debt in bankruptcy. The previous owner of this land went bankrupt when he wasn't able to develop it. And so there are a lot of different landowners, because I bet basically all of this guy's creditors got a piece, but this company bought up most of the debt. So they're the majority landowner, and they essentially control, they're the controlling voice in what's going to be happening. And so they applied for a permit from Santa Clara County for this open pit sand and gravel mine. And I'm sorry to be sort of whipping through this so quickly, but I want to leave time for questions. And the name of the proposal is Sargent Ranch Quarry, because this property was called Sargent Ranch for decades. This is, I think this is from Google Satellite. I originally got this from the tribe, from the Amah Mutsun Tribal Band. Or it may be a drone photo, but I think it's a Google Satellite photo. And this basically is the angle on this. This is being taken from the southeast, looking northwest towards Santa Cruz up here. Okay. And so this is Highway 101 here in the foreground. This is the granite rock quarry that we were just looking at, that huge quarry. And so the Sargent Ranch property is this big. It's really, it goes, whoops, darn it, I clicked accidentally. Goes all the way down to here. This is the border of the county, by the way, the southern border of the county. And this green strip is the Pajaro River. You can see where it crosses under 101, and then it sort of cuts over there. And the quarry would be, let me see, where is the, okay, that's it. It would be like right around here, okay? I think here, basically, in this sort of valley area, and then out to here, and then this is where they would, this is where they would access the property. So yeah, let me go to this next one. So this, again, just to locate it for you on the map, this is the project location. You can see Gilroy, Morgan Hill, and San Jose, and 101 going down here, and the dotted line here is the boundary of Santa Clara County. Okay, and so this image shows where the actual mine pits would be. So you can see it's basically, as I tried to show you with my cursor on that that aerial view. We've got 3 pits, 1, 2, and this big one here, hundreds of feet deep. We've got this service road here in red, which is going to go like right alongside on the sort of the western slope of that ridge. There's also a 1.5 mile long conveyor belt that would go right next to the service road at about 4 feet off the ground. So that's a pretty serious barrier for wildlife movement. You can imagine the noise, you're transporting rocks, you've got this belt that's running, machinery and so on. We've got the processing plant over here, which is going to be 60 acres. And in terms of the wildlife connectivity, you can see where the processing plant is, and it is right here next to where Tar Creek goes underneath Highway 101. So in terms of the barrier to wildlife, the reason why it's such an issue is that 101 is a barrier for wildlife movement, right? Wildlife need to either go underneath or try to dash across, risk getting hit by vehicles. There aren't very many places where they can go underneath. The creeks are really kind of it. So you've got Tar Creek here, you've got the Pajaro River, and you've got Sargent Creek here going underneath here. There's miles in between these. And there's been surveys done by a group called Pathways for Wildlife that have shown that this is the biggest and most used undercrossing under 101, but for the animals. And so we've got this processing plant here right next to it. And, and what a processing plant is for a quarry, it's this place where they sort and wash and crush the rock. So huge amounts of noise. If you've been out in, an open space area where there was any kind of heavy machine or operating nearby, then you'll know what I'm talking about when I say it's so loud. I mean, I've heard like bulldozers, going that I would have sworn were like right nearby. And then it turns out they were like a couple of miles away. It's just so loud. So there's just no doubt. And also the trucks that would cart the material from the processing plant would go through this underpass, because there's, in addition to the creek, that's where the road goes. So they're all going right through that underpass, you know, where the animals go. So that's the huge block to the wildlife. And I just mentioned the truck traffic. We're talking about hundreds of trucks a day generating, according to the EIR, 7,400 metric tons of CO2 equivalents annually. So that gives you an idea of how of the amount of truck traffic that we're talking about. And I should also say that that assumption is that figure is based on an assumption that they're going to be able to move at least some of this by rail, because there is a rail spur here that connects to the Union Pacific rail line. So they want to be, they're hoping to be able to work with Union Pacific to activate that rail spur and be able to move some of their product by rail, but they're still going to have to move a lot of it by truck. So that 7,400 metric tons of CO2 is based on the assumption that they're going to be able to move some of it by rail. So if that doesn't work out, that number will go up. And Karen, you mentioned the water issues there. So they're going to need to pump groundwater for mining operations, which I think is primarily just spraying to keep the dust down. And so their estimate for how much they're going to pump is 86,000 gallons of groundwater per day of mine operations. So that's the kind of impacts that we're talking about. The mine is projected to operate for 30 years. That's just an estimate right now. We often see quarries of this sort to keep going. You know, they often go longer than their original estimate. You know, that's just based on, you know, the amount of material that they think is there is how long that they're going to take. And all this information, I should say, comes from documents filed with the county by the quarry applicant and from the county's environmental impact report that analyzed the impacts of the mine. Okay, and so this is a drone photograph this is what the site looks like today. That is where 2 of the quarry pits would be. And this is that creek, Sargent Creek. You can see that going through there. So so you can see what the hills look like now, how basically untouched it is, and you know, you can imagine what it's going to look like. So I know that you know, as a climate group, you guys are interested in specifically in the climate impacts here, and so I should say. The quarry applicant claims that the quarry would be sustainable, would be climate friendly. And that's an interesting claim. I mean, so we will set aside for the moment the fact that obviously ecologically this is going to be a disaster, you know, but the argument that they make is essentially we need the sand and gravel, the aggregate, that's the term, in the industry, that we need that for building materials. They say that it's preferable to have it mined locally rather than to have it imported. They say, you know, it's better than having it imported from Canada. That's the argument that they make. And so therefore this is sustainable. It's farm to table. That was a phrase that one of the proponents used to a reporter. And they're trying to say it's great, you know, we should do this because because of the climate impacts. But here's the thing, is that argument actually doesn't hold up. So first of all, the percentage of aggregate that is imported, which is from Canada, from British Columbia. There are quarries that are like right on the ocean, I think on Vancouver Island actually. And so there's some aggregate imported from there. It's not the majority of the market. I'm actually in the process of finding out how much it is. But it's not a huge amount. It's not the majority of the market. It's fairly small. That's the first thing. There's no shortage of locally produced aggregate is the point I'm trying to make. There's that huge granite rock quarry in Aromas. There's the Stevens Creek quarry in Cupertino. The Lehigh quarry we hope is closing down. So you know, so that's stopped, but they haven't quarried for, I believe, for a couple of years anyway. There's a quarry in Half Moon Bay, and you know, there's other quarries locally. So the assessments that I've seen from the California Department of Conservation say that, you know, we still have decades worth of local, you know, sourced material aggregate in the Bay Area, and even more in Monterey County, very nearby. So the quarry would be more likely to displace other local sources of aggregate rather than to reduce imports. And this is something that I have gathered from talking to people who are in this industry, who are in the business of producing or of selling this kind of aggregate material, and the sand, when they crush it down into sand, to mix with cement to create concrete. They point out that the type of product that you would get locally here, like the type of product that would be likely to be mined at Juristac at the Sargent Ranch Quarry, would be likely to be similar to the stuff that's already here. The stuff that's brought in from British Columbia is different. I'm not a structural engineer, so I don't know the details, but basically there are certain specifications for which those quarries in British Columbia are considered to be a better source. So it's just more likely that a new local source would displace an existing local source rather than that it would reduce imports. Secondly, the cost of aggregate is basically determined by the cost of transport. Aggregate is an inexpensive material. It's rock, this is not, it's a bunch of rocks. It's inexpensive to produce. Oh, whoops, what did I just do? Sorry about that. I think I just bumped my keyboard or something. But it's aggregate is inexpensive, but it's extremely heavy. I mean, again, it's rock. So what determines the cost of the product, of the aggregate, is how much fuel is needed to move it, right? If you were somebody who, if you had a quarry right on site, you could have it for extremely cheap. If you have to move it, then it's basically determined, the cost of it is determined by the cost of the fuel. And it's cheaper to ship it by rail than by truck, and it's even cheaper to ship it by water on slow-moving barges. You can see how if you can ship something heavy by water, that makes the problem of the weight go away. Whereas when you're moving it by truck, weight is a huge factor in how much fuel you're going to need. And aggregate that's imported from British Columbia is moved by water the entire way. The barges come down from Vancouver Island and dock at the port of Redwood City. So I've spoken with, it was a confidential conversation, but I've spoken with somebody who's involved in the aggregate industry. And he said it's just it's just a constant source of shock to him that the price is the same, for bringing it in by barge from British Columbia versus moving it by truck locally. So the only reason that Canadian aggregate is even competitive in the Bay Area market is because the cost is basically equivalent to locally produced aggregate. And so if the cost is equivalent, then that means the amount of fuel used is equivalent. And so unless barges are using some kind of extra polluting fuel that I'm not aware of, then the greenhouse gas emissions, the carbon emissions are also going to be equivalent. So it comes down to it being a wash in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. And then finally, and most importantly, the truly sustainable option is to use recycled aggregate, right? Rather than simply saying, what different sort of virgin material can we choose? Where should we dig a giant hole in the earth and mine fresh material? Rather than saying that, we should be saying, hey, what can we do to be truly sustainable and to prioritize the use of recycled aggregate? So I've had a conversation with Zanker Recycling, which is also known as green waste. So they accept concrete debris from demolition products, crush it, and sell the crushed concrete. And that project is basically the same as virgin aggregate for uses such as base rock material for road construction and so on. And even these existing quarries like Stevens Creek Quarry and Granite Rock Quarry, they sell recycled aggregate as well as quarried material. And so the conversations that I've had with folks, they all agree that what needs to happen to make the construction industry more sustainable is to get this kind of recycled material accepted more widely for use. The barrier to that is, in a large part, just reluctance to change. It's like the same problem with getting people to change their habits in order to become more climate friendly in other ways, like switch to a heat pump, or an EV or something like that. There's a resistance to change. The specifications would need to be changed and so on. And so that's, there's not a huge amount of motivation to get that done. But this is something that people are working on. And so hopefully in the not too distant future, we're going to be seeing more of a movement towards an emphasis of, on using recycled material rather than quarrying. But, that's something that we're looking into as well at Green Foothills. So, so what is next? Okay. So like I said before, the environmental impact report came out. The county received over 7,000 comment letters from the public, which if you haven't been involved in commenting on an EIR in the past or very frequently, that's a lot. It's really an unusual amount. So there's just really overwhelming public opposition to this quarry proposal. And so now they have to review and respond to all those comments. That's going to take them a while. And then only after they're done with that will the County Planning Commission vote on whether to grant the permits for the quarry. And then that can be appealed to the Board of Supervisors. So I'm predicting that that's not going to happen. I'm predicting many months at least. I would frankly be surprised if it happened this year, 2023. I've been wrong before, but my prediction is we're not going to see anything earlier than 2024. And just based on how many years of delay there were before the EIR even came out, and my own knowledge about how busy Santa Clara County Planning Department is right now, it could be quite a while before we hear it. But anyway, that's what we're waiting on doing. So here's something you can do. And I know you can't just click on these links since I'm sharing my screen, but I'm happy to share this presentation with the group afterwards. And you'll be able to click on the links, or I can put them in the chat if you'd like. So there's a link to the form on the Green Foothills website where you can send a comment into the county. You can also sign the petition on the Protect Juristac website. And then I thought I would also just provide this because I learned about this event recently. This is it's a hybrid event. It's in person, but also as you can zoom in to watch. It's called Conversations on Climate Justice. And one of the speakers will be Chair Valentin Lopez of the Amah Mutsun tribe. And the event description says that it highlights the connection between indigenous land ethics, carbon sequestration, biodiversity augmentation, anthropogenic habitat expansion, and regional ecosystem connectivity. So wide range of topics there. I think that sounds really interesting. And again, I can share this presentation. It's a Google slide thing so that you'll be able to just like go to it and click on the links if you want to. And I think that's all I've got. Yes, let me stop sharing. Yeah. And thank you for your attention.
Great, thanks, Alice. Before we get started with questions, I just want Alice to let you know that I was recording the meeting. And so, I would recommend that you do put those links, in the chat, but also if anyone, I certainly have all the emails from our members that are here. If others want the recorded presentation that will include all of the information, including the links that you just saw that Alice provided, please put your information in the chat, and I'll be sure to send you everything. So
also, I can put it in the next newsletter.
Oh, great, fantastic! Thank you, Deb.
Yeah,
that's
we'll
perfect.
talk about. Yeah,
that would be good.
Yeah, that's great. So I guess just to get started, I know you mentioned a couple of things we can do. Let's talk a little bit about, before we move on to detailed questions, if we might. You mentioned signing a petition and letters, that it's probably not going to happen this year. Is there anything else other than people just staying apprised by checking your website, et cetera, that we could be doing right now?
Yeah, thanks. I think, well, in addition to sending in, letters to the county or signing the petition and so on, like I said, spreading the word. I think that this, this sustainability argument that the quarry owners are trying to come out with is, you'll notice that it took me a while to sort of, break it down and explain, why that doesn't hold water. I think that, some people will hear that and will just go, oh yeah, of course, local's better, and won't think further than that. So helping to spread the word, you have, enormous credibility as climate reality, you know, as a group that focuses on climate issues. And so to, you know, to show that, you know, that you are not backing up, you know, these arguments, I think would be really helpful, because, you know, it's, you know, like I said, I can explain to people how those arguments don't hold water, but they have to like pay attention, which a lot of people are not super good at. So.
Right. Well, I've got another question, but I'm going to hold it and start out with the hands raised. Bob, do you have a question?
Am I unmuted right now?
Yes, you are.
Okay. I was just curious. I was distracted for a little bit during your presentation, so I apologize if you mentioned this or not, but the quarry that's in Cupertino that has generated so much problems there with the residents, with the trucks and the dust and everything that's going on, they want to expand it now. Are the people that are proposing this quarry the same people that own that quarry, or is that a different group that wants to do this?
No, this is a different group. Yes. So this is the they're doing business as Sargent Ranch Partners, I think is what they're called. But the group that's proposing this is the Debt Acquisition Company of America. So they buy debt in bankruptcy. That's their business model. And they're based in San Diego. The quarry in Cupertino that you're talking about, that's the Lehigh. You're talking about the Lehigh Permanente quarry.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's owned by the Heidelberg Cement Company, I believe, from Germany. And they're, you know, they announced last fall that they were not going to start up their cement production again, and that they were not going to quarry any fresh material, but they have a huge amount of material stockpiled there. So they are going to continue processing that. I think that actually Katja might be able to say more. She might have been paying more attention to this, or I could look it up and let you know later. But they said that they could continue processing their material there for another 20 years. So you know, we're very happy that they said they're not going to operate the cement kiln anymore, because that was a source of a lot of air emissions. But you know, the fact that they're, you know, going to continue crushing the rock there is not great news. So.
One quick other question. It seems like, you know, this is pristine land right now and has a lot of history. It seems better to like mine this kind of aggregate in a place like Nevada or Utah, where there's not a lot of population around. You have trains that can bring it forward to the Bay Area, and it would be cheaper and more environmentally sound to transport it by trains rather than trucks. So is anyone looking at that? Is the planning department looking at that? Is others looking at that for an alternative to this, you know, semi-urban area that's more pristine?
I don't know if anybody is. I mean, I'm pretty sure the planning department is not. It's not really their job to find another quarry site. You know, their job is just to review this application. So, right. I mean,
Okay, I understand.
yeah, I don't know if anybody else is. No.
That which poses an interesting problem that you know, who's is the fox in the hen house here, so to speak. You know, who is making those choices? So so I guess Glenn, if I could have you pose your question.
Yeah, thanks, Alice. A great presentation. Can you clarify for me? So currently right now there's the South Bay is providing quarry material from Cupertino and Monterey and imports. I mean, were those three sources? Are there other sources?
Oh, I mean, I would have to. I do not have a comprehensive list of everywhere that you know, of every, you know, exactly where all of the stuff might be coming in. I know that the the ones I named are probably the major sources. That quarry in Aromas, which is not, it's in Santa Cruz, right near the Santa Cruz San Bernardino County border. I think Aromas is in Santa Cruz County. So that's a huge quarry, and that they have. So I know they ship their material by rail up to Redwood City, because Granite Rock has a big crushing operation there.
I see.
So that it comes in that way.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the Stevens Creek Quarry, which is near Stevens Creek, obviously. I don't know how much they produce. Yeah, I don't know. I couldn't break it down for you. I am trying to find that information because I think it's important for me to know, but I don't have that right now.
Just to answer, right before the meeting, Alice, I Googled, sand and gravel quarries in California, and I couldn't believe the number. That's a huge, if you look at the map, it's in a lot, and I was focusing on Northern California. There's really, really a lot of them. Again, for what Alice is saying, some of them might be quite small, and I didn't have the time. I wasn't looking at, how large they were, but nevertheless, there's a number that do exist.
Okay, and these quarries that you mentioned, Alice, are supplying all of the Bay Area or predominantly South Bay or Santa Clara?
I mean, again, like I said, Granite Rock ships they have a big crushing facility in Redwood City. So that's sort of their main, that's their main sort of source point for their Bay Area operations. So,
okay.
Yeah, I don't know where, I don't know where their business model, extends to. I would have to do a lot of research to find out all of that information. Okay,
that's all. Thank you.
Oh, sure. Thanks, Glenn. Alice, in the chat, you have a question. If you want to, I can either repeat it, or if you want to go off mute and pose your question. Guess let me do that then. So does Santa Clara County Valley Water Agency have a position on the pit? It seems that it would harm water quality, not just be a drain on the precious water supply. Good question.
Yeah, that is a good question. I don't think that they have taken an official position on it. Most local agencies are a little hesitant to to sort of like to step in when something like this is being reviewed by another agency. They'll usually send in a comment letter on for the environmental impact report. Like for example, I know that the Bay Area Air Quality Management District submitted a fairly detailed comment letter just saying these are the various things that that we have concerns about. These are some of the mitigation measures that we think should be taken care of. Some of the mitigations that they've proposed we think are questionable. That, and I can share that. I can share that letter with you guys if you're interested, because I had a conversation with the staffer at the Air District about that. I don't know if the Water District has submitted a comment letter yet. I have asked the county to share the comment letters that they've received with us, because those aren't like posted on the website or anything like that, but they are a public record. So I asked, and they were like, great, there's 7,500 of them. As soon as we're done, going through them and redacting everybody's personal emails, because we're not going to share those publicly, we will be very happy to give you those. So, so I am waiting. Yeah, I may be waiting for a while. But yeah, I mean, they may have, the Water District may be opposing it. They may have sent in a letter saying we don't like this mine. It's going to be terrible for the groundwater. I hope they did, but I don't know yet.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Gary.
Okay, Alice, thanks for a very thorough and well constructed presentation. You hit one of the things I was curious about. What are the alternatives? And you went into that. The question I have, and you may not know offhand, if they went ahead with the quarry as planned, would that be something visible from 101?
Great question. The answer is yes, part of it would be. A couple of the pits will be on the other side of sort of that first ridge, you know, when you're on 101, you look up and you see like, like the lower ridge of hills and then another one beyond that. And so there's kind of like a valley in between. And so a couple of the pits would be there, but the biggest one would like, it sort of like goes up the far side of the ridge of the second ridge. I'm sorry, I'm not explaining this very clearly. The far side of the valley is what I should say. So that will be visible from 101. I mean, they went through all of this in the EIR in the aesthetic chapter, analyze, taking, superimposing what you would expect to see. They take pictures of of places from 101 and what you expect to see. So there's that. And then there's the processing plant and the basically giant pile of overburden, of waste rock that would really be pretty close to the freeway. They're going to build a berm, a screening berm to block the view of the processing plant from the freeway. But the screening berm itself is ugly, so it's like, all right, we're not going to have to see the processing plant and the heavy machinery. But like when you say screening, because they're like, oh, we'll construct it out of the overburden, which is a pile of rock. So like right now you see like the hillsides, and instead there's going to be like a giant, like a 200-foot long pile of rock right next to the freeway. I put this actually in my comment to the EIR. I was just like, that is itself an impact. Like your mitigation is an impact, because I don't want to look at a giant pile of rock instead of at the hillsides. So yes, that's kind of a long answer to your question, but yes, the answer is, and even with that screening berm, there are still parts of it that are going to be visible. So
fantastic, thank you. That's interesting. I hadn't even thought about that as an issue, but that's good to know. So Lisa, do you want to pose your question? I think Lisa's still here.
Oh, sure. I was just wondering about, when, I commute up to Fremont and I see that they're taking down all of these malls and there's all of this construction material. Do you know about California's, I guess, recyclable construction laws, and if there's facilities nearby that could provide materials?
Yeah. So I know that if you go on like the Cal Recycle webpage, and I can provide these links as well if you guys are interested, like the Cal Recycle webpage, the what's the industry group called? I think just like the Building Construction Trades Industry Group Association, something like that. They all have web pages talking about using recycled materials, how what you do, because it's really, I mean, you can crush concrete down and you get basically aggregate. You can crush it and use it to make more concrete, right? You can do that. So this is something that's happening. There's all these places locally, well, several places locally. I don't want to say there's dozens of them or anything, but there's several places locally that sell recycled material to be used in building and construction. But I think I was saying this earlier, the drawback is that for, I don't know if you guys can hear the planking sounds, but somebody's putting away the dishes, which is great, but making a lot of noise. The problem with trying to switch entirely to recycled materials is that the engineering specifications are from decades ago, and they are hidebound. They specify certain like single source essentially materials. The people that I've talked to say that it doesn't need to be this way, that the specifications should be changed, should be updated to make it easier to use recycled materials. But how do you make that happen? So there's barriers, but there are people who are working on it. So hopefully it will soon become easier to prioritize use of recycled materials in building and construction. I hope does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
I'm going to give Bob a little time to get off mute, because I'd like in one of the articles that I saw, I guess it was a Spotlight article, there was a lot of emphasis on, housing and so I wanted, for those of you who might have read that Spotlight article, Bob is an urban planner from his whole career. So he knows a little bit about, what's going on with housing and the construction of housing. And I just wanted to give people a little clarity about that, because the way the article read, it's like, it's going to impact, all housing. So Bob, if you want to share a little bit about where concrete's used for multifamily housing and how that works.
Yeah, I can give a little bit of insight into that. Most housing that's going to be built in the next couple decades is going to be mid-range housing. The era of single-family housing spread out over miles is pretty well gone in the Bay Area. So what's happening is that urban clusters are going to be built in the future of housing, mostly along transportation corridors, and that have good bus and sometimes rail transit. Most of the housing is going to be built from 3 to 5, 6 stories. That type of construction usually has one layer of concrete, or just a foundation of concrete and parking underneath. Most of it then above that one layer of concrete is wood frame construction. And that's a type of construction that's feasible in most locations. High-rise housing is very costly to build. And the only place you're really going to see that in the next decade is in the major downtowns, or where high density is being promoted. It's just not affordable unless you've got great subsidies to build housing, high rise, 8, 10 above stories, with all that concrete that's necessary to build those high rise. It's just not feasible. And that's why there's a lot of proposals for high rises, especially downtown San Jose, but also other areas. That's not being built right now. It's too expensive. You can't get the rent to do it. So you're going to see a lot of 3, 4, 5-story buildings built along El Camino Real and other major streets, Bascom Avenue, other places that are going to be a little bit of concrete on the base, a lot of wood construction above. And
Right.
that's going to be the situation. So, you're not going to need as much concrete as everyone talks about, I believe, but there's going to be a need for some, and we have sources for some, but that's my perspective on that. And same with office construction. There's a lot of office building right now that are vacant, that are low rise, that are medium rise. That's going to fill up a lot before the high rises come back again. And unfortunately, the pandemic did a big number on urban development. It's going to take a while to recover from that, but we'll see how it goes in the future. But That's my perspective.
And that's why I wanted you to share that, because it's sort of, you might say, misinformation to suggest that all of our housing needs require huge amounts of concrete. So thanks, Bob, for clarifying that. Let's see, I've got Lisa.
Marty has his hand up. Karen, I think Marty has his hand up.
Oh, yes, I wanted before Marty, I'm sort of trying to do this in order of questions. So thank you, Glenn. I've got one question before Marty. You're up next after this from Mary. Do you want to share your question, Mary?
I think you already covered it with the other water district question. So you can
You're
pass
good.
on mine and just move ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you. So Marty, you're up.
Sorry. So mainly comments, and then if the speaker could comment on the comments, if you would. So up the river, up the watershed from Pajaro is Uvas Creek, and on there is the Adams, I believe it's Chidak Tac, I'm probably mispronouncing it, which is probably related to Juristac. That was indigenous property or land, whatever, that the folks of the tribe were able to fence off and preserve burial site as well as some artifacts like large stones. Question would be, could they not do a similar, the same thing with that Chidaktak, or at least throw, pun intended, sand and gravel in this large machine trying to do that development? So if the indigenous were able to, congregate and then I think they might be able to at least slow down the process by claiming, indigenous artifacts in that area. The other thing was 50 years ago, maybe 60 years ago, there were several gravel pits on the Uvas Creek, small ones. They did havoc for the steelhead runs, as well as there's no more salmon on that watershed, but that watershed goes through Pajaro. Seems to me that, of course, the development is going to say, oh, we're not going to cause any watershed problems. But wait a minute, you're running right through major watersheds feeding the Pajaro. The Pajaro already is polluted by agricultural waste, but and yet we have steelhead running through there up to the Uvas. So it seems like you would have some other jurisdiction come in. I don't know, Fish and Game or another jurisdiction that would say, whoa, forget about that. Don't forget about, crossways. But in addition to that, you have a watershed that is very delicate because of the presence of steelhead. The other one was, you mentioned the number of gravel pits. There's Stevens Creek, Sunol. Sunol has a very large one, and the Redwood City, as well as, we have to be careful because there's granite construction and granite rock, two different entities, and granite rock is the one that has the quarry, but all aggregate is not the same. I'm sure you can that. So when we say aggregate, we have to attempt to get, I think one push would be, we have requirements in the Bay Area, and construction is penalized by sending debris to the dump. So construction is penalized for putting that in the dump, but then we're not, and you mentioned this and I totally agree, we're not changing the specs in order to utilize the recycled rock, etc. So if we could put a force in that direction to speed up the process of changing the specifications. The bulk of the spec from this project, and I'm guessing here, is not going to be concrete. It's going to be roadbed material or something lower quality, if you will. I'm saying lower quality, not quality, I shouldn't have said that, but lower aggregate cost, if you will. And a lot of the recycled you cannot use for roadbed because of the specifications you already referred to. But if we could speed that up, then that specification update, then a lot of this argument for the economics of this thing would go away, or at least be reduced. The other thing is the groundwater in the Gilroy area. There's hardly anything there. So the county was trying to enforce regulating how much groundwater was taken out of the ground. Well, this would be an enormous amount of groundwater taken out in order to perform the processing of the gravel. Seems to me that, forget about the watershed, just the groundwater usage would limit the project perhaps, unless someone's taking a back pocket, check. Somehow they're getting in the back pocket. Final one would be Joe Simidian worked with the Stevens Creek Quarry and the other one was, and seemed to be successful as political. I think he's county supervisor. My question is, I thought he covered Santa Clara, but I'm not sure. So because of his expertise in delving into all of the problems they've had at the plant, the concrete plant, seems like it would be a fairly, I shouldn't say easy transition, but he would be a knowledgeable transition for the South Bay. That's about it.
Yeah, okay, well, you covered about 6 different topics. I'll try to answer or comment on your comments. Let me see, I think oh gosh, okay. I'll answer what I can.
Well,
what I can remember
maybe the indigenous one, because there is indigenous
yes, okay, stop talking before I forget what I was going to say. Yes, sorry, I was just like, trying to keep it all in my head. Yes, and thank you for bringing it up. I know I sort of like covered it very, very briefly at the beginning, but the EIR laid out just like well, I'm not going to say in great detail, because the details, including the actual locations of the archaeological sites, are confidential. Which I'm assuming is they don't want anybody going out there with a shovel, and saying, I want to get some artifacts. The EIR made it clear that there are a couple of village sites here within the quarry footprint. There is a strong possibility of burial sites, human burial sites there as well. But in addition to these sort of like the specific sites, the entire landscape is considered important. It's considered culturally important under CEQA. As the Amah Mutsun say, it's like it's the spirituality of their spirituality considers the entire landscape sacred, and you can't say, oh well, we'll only dig up part of it, but you've got all the rest of it. It's like, you wouldn't say that, like if somebody said to the Pope, well, we're all going to dig up a little bit of the Vatican and you've got all the rest of it. That's like, I'm sorry if I'm being flip here, but it seems comparable, right? So that the idea is that the entire landscape is spiritually significant. So and what I'm saying is that the EIR agreed with that. The EIR found 14 different significant and unavoidable impacts, which in CEQA jargon means this is something that you're going to have to find an overriding consideration in order to approve the quarry. There several of those were on the cultural impacts. There was the biological impacts, including the blocking of the wildlife corridor. There was transportation impacts. There was aesthetics. Like I said, you can see it from the highway. Air quality. I think that's it. Yeah. So yeah.
Watershed.
That was not one of them that was mentioned in the EIR, which doesn't necessarily mean that that's not significant. I definitely am going to be interested to see what the Valley Water, what they have to say. Also the Regional Water Quality Control Board. This is in the Central Coast area, not the Bay. So it's not the Bay Regional Water Quality Control Board. It's going to be the Central Coast one. We'll see what they have to say about it, because I find it hard to believe that that level of pumping of groundwater is not considered to be an impact on the watershed and on the groundwater aquifer. So, but we'll see. We'll see what kind of comments come in.
I would like to maybe, can we come back, Marty? Can we come back to you? I'd love to get a couple of other questions through here, and then we'll come back to you. Is that okay? Unless Alice, you have a quick thought.
Well, what I wanted to say was I did see a comment pop up in the chat about the articles say that the site will produce sand, not aggregate. I keep on using the word aggregate. Sand and gravel and the various different sizes of crushed rock are known as aggregate. So, but most people don't know that term. So they'll say it's sand and gravel. The sand being used to mix with cement to create concrete, and the gravel being used, as Marty was saying, in things like roadbed projects and so on. But it's just different sizes, and it's all called aggregate. Excuse me.
And I think that answers Adam. That was your question? Is that correct? That was basically your question, maybe. Well, we'll come back to you. But in case it didn't answer it, but let's catch Lori's question. And I don't know if Lori, if you want to share that. I think some of it might have already been answered.
Hi. Yeah, thank you for calling on me. And thank you, Alice, for a really thorough presentation. We were just talking with Marty about the indigenous, what kind of policies and protections, because it's on ancestral land, what kind of legal protections are there available that may help the fight?
None. Our laws are not super great. This tribe is not a federally recognized tribe, and the history for why that is actually really, really shameful for the state of California. I'll just really, without going into a whole lot of detail, basically, sometime in the mid 1800s, there were a whole lot of, and California, you should know, California, particularly the Bay Area, had just a greater proliferation of distinct tribes than most of the rest of the country, partly because this area was just so fertile, such a great place to live, like it still is. But there were a whole lot of tribes. So there were a lot of tribes who had signed treaties. They were going to be recognized by the federal government, but the state of California blocked it, essentially. There's a whole history in that I can share with you. But so it's like, I have heard some criticisms of people saying, well, this tribe isn't even federally recognized. And it's like, if you knew, that's like, that was deliberately done, by the state of California in like the 1850s or 1860s. And so, yeah, that's why. So anyway, so you're asking what kind of legal protections are there? There really aren't, for a tribe that doesn't have federal recognition, there really aren't that kind of strong legal protection. We do have some state laws that basically tell agencies that they need to consult with tribes, right? Whenever they're going to approve a project like that. So, and that's been done. And the county of Santa Clara, I will say they did a good job of, the consultation with the tribe, which is one of the reasons why the EIR was able to, provide all of this information about the spirituality of the site. The hope, and I'll say this, the hope, I think, of everybody who's working on this is that this land could be purchased for conservation.
Right.
To like the Sinkione land up in Redwoods that just was purchased and given back to their tribe this last summer, something like that.
Yes. So, if this was done, it probably would be done through some sort of consortium of open space agencies, and there would probably be an easement, a conservation easement on it, so that it could never be developed. Because I think that people have concerns, and I'll just say this because I know that some people have concerns that if a tribe gets land, they're going to build a casino. So the idea would be to purchase land and have a conservation easement on it so that it couldn't be developed. but have it then be available so that tribal members could have access to the land, you know, as open space, to be able to have ceremonies there again. So that's something that I think is really important to everybody who is working on this, and don't know if it's going to happen. I know that there are agencies and organizations who really want to be able to purchase the land, but I also know that the owner really wants to build a quarry, you know, and they would not, you know, they wouldn't get the kind of profits if they sold over conservation that they would get if they were able to get the quarry permitted. So by defeating the quarry proposal, we're hoping to push them in the direction of selling the land for conservation. But it's very clear that we have to defeat the quarry proposal for that to happen, because they can get more money through through having a quarry, and that's what they want to do.
Right. Has anyone reached out to the Center for Biological Diversity?
I didn't mention them. Yes, they are part of our coalition. They have been in on this very strongly for several years now. So you should see the comment letter they wrote for the EIR. It's very long. It's a thing of beauty. They're very involved.
Great. Well, I'll do whatever I can to help.
Alice, you have another question. Would you like me to read that, or would you like to just share your question?
Oh, sure. Yeah, read it to me. I'm sorry, I haven't been able to keep up with the chat.
Oh,
It's been a lot.
Yeah, and so let me read Alice's. She says recycling.
Oh, sorry, you're talking to me.
Yeah, that's okay. Another Alice. Recycling and construction materials. The city of San Jose requires contractors to pay a deposit for a project, which is refundable if a % of construction debris is sent to an approved recycling facility. So I'm not sure is that just a comment on?
Yeah, well, I think Marty, oh, I'm sorry if I just talked over.
That's okay.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, just in my eagerness to answer. Yeah, and then Marty referred to this as well. So yeah, there are incentives with some cities for, you know, for basically keeping stuff out of the landfill, you know. But the problem, and I think Marty alluded to this, and this is again what I'm being told by folks in the industry, is the same problem that it often is with recycling. You can recycle the stuff, but then sometimes you end up with just big piles of it because the market isn't there. So, you know, I'm told that there's, you know, in some of these recycling centers, there's just piles of the base rock that it would be great. They really want to be able to use, but, you know, again, the engineering specifications for construction are not really allowing it. So, you know, it's a challenge, but it's something that you know, that hopefully will be evolving. This is what I'm told, is that people are saying that they expect that you know, within a few years, I don't know exactly how many years that is. It could be 3, it could be 10, it could be 20. That the specifications basically that people will be able to use recycled material more freely.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, thanks. And I'm going to come back to Adam, to you, because I wasn't sure if you got your question answered, if you wanted to restate that, or, you know, if you want to speak out about your question.
No, it's a pretty simple question. I think it's fine. There's a question of whether sand that they have here is somehow, you know, spec wise different from what comes from our other sources that we already have locally or not. But the basic question is answered just fine. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, I think that is the end of our questions. Unless, Marty, there are some other comments that you made that Alice, you want to you know, comment on what Marty was saying. I know there was Marty, is there anything more that you'd like that you were talking about that you'd like Alice to comment on?
No, the only thing I was trying to do is put out other agencies that might join the fray to slow down the process. So that would be water, and I don't know this, but the watershed or the water usage or the air quality board, which I think she mentioned, and somehow, you know, protecting the steelhead, there's got to be an agency that is protecting that watershed. They're going to claim, oh, we're not affecting the watershed, but you could make a strong argument how they would be doing it, and that there were. So anyway, I was just trying to have other agencies come in and join the fray to slow down the process.
No, thank you, and thank you for. I knew I wanted to because you said steelhead, you know, in the middle of your comments before, and then I meant to respond to that and then forgot. It is there. There is. I can't remember now from the EIR if steelhead have been sighted in Tar Creek, which is the one that runs right next to the processing plant, or if it's just been identified as steelhead habitat. I know for sure it's been identified as steelhead habitat. I think they said steelhead have been sighted there. This is, you know, I don't know if people are familiar with the Santa Clara Valley Habitat Plan, but you know, when you've got endangered or threatened species, and if you have a project that's going to impact them, you know, you have to get permits. You have to take permits essentially from U.S. Department of Fish and Wildlife and California U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and California Department of Fish and Wildlife. Always get them mixed up. And I just mentioned the habitat plan. Forget that I said that, because this site is not in the habitat plan. That's what I was going to say, is it's not in the, because that's a question that people in environmental groups often ask me, is this within the Habitat Agency's jurisdiction? And the answer is no. So this project is going to have to get approvals and permits from the wildlife agencies. There's, in addition to the steelhead, there's California red-legged frog, which is a threatened species, I think, California tiger salamander. Oh, what else? There's some endangered plants on the site. There's, I mentioned badger, a mountain lion obviously is a candidate for listing. There's several bird species that have habitat on the site. So this is all going to be an issue. The red-legged frog, there's frogs all over. There's this one creek, Sargent Creek, runs right in between two of the quarry pits. And there are red-legged frogs living in the stream, which is actually kind of unusual. You know, we have a lot of pond dwelling, well, not a lot, because they're endangered. But you know, usually when you see red-legged frogs, you're seeing them in pond habitats. Having them in stream dwelling habitats is unusual. The wildlife biologists are all really excited about that. So I think that's something that's going to come up.
Mm-hmm. You know, just as a wrap up, because I don't see any more questions. You know, we've talked a lot about the agencies that should get involved. I'm wondering if you could share with us a little bit about some of the cities and the organizations that are already supporting this, because I think it's a really long list. And obviously, you know, I don't want you to have to repeat them all, but I think just to give us a sample of the kind of agencies and you know, that are already supporting this and organizations.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I mentioned the ACLU of Northern California, Center for Biological Diversity. Thank you, Lori, for mentioning them. Sierra Club, Audubon, Native Plant Society. Gosh, I'm going to forget everybody. Greenbelt Alliance, Sustainable Silicon Valley. I just think basically all of the environmental groups, you know, because I mean, all of them that I've approached so far. I mean, you know, there's probably others, you know, because we're a very environmentally aware region. But, you know, I've approached as many environmental groups as I can find in Santa Clara County about this, and they've signed on. We have a statement of opposition to the quarry that, you know, all these groups have signed on to. And then a whole bunch of social justice groups have signed on. You know, Latinos United for a New America. Yeah, I don't want to keep going on and on. But yeah, we've got like 50, I think, more than 50 organizations signed on. A number of local elected officials, Senator Dave Cortese, several assembly members, Ash Kalra, Mark Berman, Evan Lowe, a number of city council members. The idea is that we want to demonstrate just the overwhelming public opposition to the quarry. And, so we've been basically going to a whole lot of groups, and we've been doing this for years. Oh, I should say there's a number of, because you mentioned this, Karen, 5 cities so far have passed, city councils have passed resolutions calling on the county to deny the quarry permit and to protect Juristac. So those cities are Gilroy, Morgan Hill, obviously they're very close to the quarry, Sunnyvale, Santa Clara. I'm talking to the city council of Mountain View right now about getting that done there. City of Santa Cruz did, County of Santa Cruz. So we're just, we're just going around and around the place and gathering support.
Well, thank you. You've given us a really thorough understanding of the issue. It's to me really important. It's wonderful to work on federal, state, and regional issues. It's so important to work on local issues. And this is right in our backyard that we need, something we need to protect right here. So thank you so much. And if you want to add anything more to the chat, because I think now if we can hold everybody's attention for a minute, we have a lot of great events coming up. And I wanted to have real quickly have some of our leadership share what's happening with some of those events. We've got let's start out with if we can, with the net zero. We've got 2 people, both Gary Latchaw and Campbell Scott. Campbell, they both worked really hard on this. And if you one or both of you want to share a little bit what's going on with net zero in the next few meetings.
Yes, sure. We had the kickoff for a series of, it's a half a dozen talks over one a month for the next 6 months or so. The first one happened in February, and the next one is a week from Wednesday, the 8th. So that would be the 8th of March. And that's when Brian von Herzen will talk about farming kelp. The title of his talk includes the phrase forests of the sea. Kelp is a really good fixer of carbon dioxide. It can be used. Kelp becomes an ingredient in many products, so it gets sequestered that way. And if it doesn't get used that way, it sinks to the bottom of the ocean and gets into the deep water down there and is thoroughly sequestered. So I'm not going to go through the whole list, but I do also want to mention, and I forget exactly the date it's coming up, but I think it may be in May. Maybe Gary can correct me. It relates to what we were talking about here, and that's Brian Constance of Blue Planet Systems are making concrete in a very different, unusual way that actually sequesters carbon dioxide. And part of it is recycling aggregate. So that might be of interest to people who want to know more about concrete. It's not the sexiest subject, but I think it's very important, and from the climate point of view and the environmental point of view, and what goes into the landfill and how it could be reused and recycled. So look out for that one. The announcement is in the newsletter. There's Eventbrite sites where you can sign up for the live version of it. That's in Calabasas Library. It's on Blaney Road, Blaney Avenue, on the west side of San Jose, right adjacent to where it meets Saratoga and Cupertino. And there's also a Zoom version of it. So Eventbrite, you sign up. We want to keep them separate so that we keep account of how many people might be in the room. There's a limit to how many many in-person persons can be there. And then if it overflows, there's always Zoom.
Great.
Oh, and
thanks.
I'm gonna interject. It's May 10th. You had the month right, Campbell.
Okay.
It's May 10th on the
Thank you.
concrete. And there will be an alert going out for the next one, another alert. There was already an alert, but there'll be a reminder alert going out in a couple days. And you can either register on Eventbrite or just follow the links. But they're exciting topics. You know, it's gives us hope that we can do more than just reduce emissions.
Thanks, Deb. Thanks, Campbell. Thank you both. So, Glenn, do you want to share a little bit about what may be happening next month for the monthly meeting?
Sure. For next monthly meeting, it looks like we have Woody Hastings, who's on staff at the Climate Center, which is a Santa Rosa-based sort of think tank and policy group that tends to focus on state level issues. So that will be March 27th, our next monthly meeting. And it'll be an opportunity for us to get a little more insight into state level activities, hopefully. And I guess I'll just comment here, maybe Adam can also chime in, just a reminder to folks that the Bay Area Air Quality Management District hearing on the zero NOx policies, or not hearing, but I guess vote, will be on March 15th. And we're assuming that public comment was worthwhile in addition to the letters that the deadline is already passed for letters. So we've submitted on that, but there's no need at this point. I guess only thing people can do that want to take further action is to try to make public comment there. So I don't exactly know the protocol, what the
It's March 15th.
yes.
That gives us enough time. I'll get with you, Glenn. It gives us enough time to do an action alert.
Yes.
And we can give people, make it simple, give them the links, tell them what to say if they want. So we'll get that out, everybody. If you want to participate, you'll get something in your inbox.
Adam, you have anything to add to that?
And I think what I would ask, we're still kind of trying to figure out exactly what that would be for people to do. So
okay. Okay, we'll get that to you, Deborah. Yeah, we wanted to get that in the newsletter. I guess one other comment, looks like we're probably going to be able to move ahead with at least one presentation at Vegelution, supported by Campbell and the Speakers Bureau. So we're looking forward to that. It's not been scheduled yet, but maybe in the midsummer. And maybe we can turn that into more than one event. So we'll see.
Fantastic. Well, and I thank you, Glenn. I appreciate that information. And I have to apologize to Adam. I did not see your final question, but I'll send that on to Alice. I think Alice Kaufman has left, but I'll send that on to her if she has the ability to respond to you. If that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think that might be what she's looking for from us. I don't know if she's been talking to any other more climate-centric groups or not.
Right. I'll definitely do that with that in mind. And I'll CC you on that. So perfect. Well, thank you all for being here. I think this was a really valuable presentation. I hope you got a lot out of it. For those of you who are not members, I think most of you now here with us now are, but in the chat, there is, you can have a number of different ways to join. Certainly you can go to our website, which is on the in the chat as well. And then Deb provided some information for everyone. So I'll let everyone take a quick look if you want to. So I won't close down yet, or be sure to save the chat for yourself and you'll have all that information at hand. So thank you also very much for being with us tonight. I so appreciate it.
Great.
Thank you guys.
For moderating it so well. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, Gary. Thank you. Thank you all. Take care.
Okay. Good night.